Hey everyone, welcome back to our study of World War II. And in this vodcast number 2, we're going to talk about how Germany takes over all of Europe, all the way to the English Channel, and just very little bit about how Hitler gains control. And for those of you who don't know, here is Mr. Hitler right here in the lead with all of his buddies surrounding him. You can tell he's Hitler because he's got the mustache. Oh wait, maybe he's Hitler. Oh, maybe he's Hitler. No, wait, he's Hitler. Nah, just kidding. There's only one Hitler. Thank goodness. First, we need to talk about how Hitler came to power. As you may know, he was in World War I. He wanted to be an artist. His father didn't support him, so that never worked out. He finally joins the Bavarian army in World War I. He's basically a courier or a messenger boy. World War I ends. Germany's over. A few of the younger men in the German army wanted to blame the leadership of the German army, and so they start this revolt among the youth. That revolt's put down in what's called the Beer Hall Revolt. Hitler and a few others are arrested. Hitler ends up serving something like 9 months in jail, and then during that time he writes the book Mein Kampf. That book becomes very popular because inside that book is what Hitler says is the answer, and that's what people in Germany were looking for. Just like in the United States in the Great Depression, people were looking for an answer. You know, how do we get out of this problem? The people of Germany during the 30s were looking on someone to lead them out of the problems. And Hitler promised revenge on Germany's enemies, and he promised to restore Germany to its former glory and former power. And slowly he rises up through the ranks with the support of the National Socialist Party. We call it the Nazi Party. Eventually gains enough control where the Chancellor or the leader of Europe, the leader of Germany, is forced to turn everything over to him. And here is Hitler's triumphant march on the day he is promoted to the title of Der Führer, or the leader. And here's Hitler giving his speech in the famous hall that you see in a lot of, if you ever watch any YouTube videos, you'll see all of Hitler's speeches being given in front of this fantastic piece of artwork. It is very brilliant. It's kind of crazy how bright it is. So the year's 1934. Hitler is Führer, and they begin their aggressions. Now, Germany did not begin its aggressions the same way Japan and Italy did. They did not immediately start out on a military raid. Germany wanted to soften the blow of what was to come. So Germany sent out delegates around the world to get people used to the idea of Nazism. And now you think the United States might be isolated from this. I mean, after all, that was our policy of isolation. But every major city around the world, including the United States, there could be found a National Socialist Party. And yes, this is George Washington. This is in America, American flags, but what you can't see is the Nazi flag right here. Draw a different color ink for you. Nazi flags. So you can't see it in this hall, but you can see it pretty clearly right here. Nazi flags and American flags flying together. The Nazi Party in Germany. The first aggressive act takes place in March of 1936. Hitler violates the Treaty of Versailles and moves into an area of Germany along the French border known as the Rhineland. So let's watch this interactive map here, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Germany moving into the Rhineland. There's Hitler gaining control of all of Germany, becoming the Führer. It's almost as if you can still hear the soldiers marching. Ha, just kidding. Again, for those of you who may not be able to see too well, the Rhine River, and is on the border of Germany and France. Along the Rhineland, or in the Rhineland, you here see a close-up map of the Rhineland. Along that line, Hitler built a line of defenses known as the Siegfried Line. I'll try to spell it without really messing up the spelling here. The Siegfried Line. And it consisted, as you can see in the picture, concrete barriers, steel barriers, and barbed wire, all designed to keep out any kind of weapons of war and soldiers. If the soldiers wanted to get through, they had to cut through the wire, and it was so thick and so heavy that they were probably shot before they could get through. Notice the size of these concrete barriers. all the way up to this man's waist. Let's just assume that this is an average size man, 5'10" to 6 foot. So it's all up to his waist. So you're looking at concrete barriers 3 feet, maybe 3.5 feet tall. So essentially, Germany and Hitler, they're remilitarizing, the country, which is again a direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles. But you need to remember, Hitler did not recognize the Treaty of Versailles. He said it was not really signed by Germany at the end of World War I. The next major movement, and this is the first country, this is just militarizing here along the Rhineland. This is some militarizing. The first country that is taken by Hitler is Austria in 1938. That's a dramatic effect for you. Later on in October of 1938, Hitler moves on to take his second country, or in this case just a piece of a country, and that is known as the Sudetenland. Now Hitler claims that this was done because there were a lot of Germans living in this area of Czechoslovakia. And he wanted the world to know that he's only taking this area of Czechoslovakia because of that, because of all the German people living there, and they want to be part of Germany. I mean, after all, what German around the world would not want to be a part of this wonderful country? You can see it blow up here. We got Czechoslovakia. This is what it looks like here. In essence, what Hitler is doing is taking a piece of a country of Czechoslovakia. In this area, the Sudetenland, let me see if I can spell it for you. The Sudetenland provides Czechoslovakia's only major piece of defenses, and that are some natural mountain ranges. So by taking this land, Hitler is essentially removing any kind of defense systems from the country of Czechoslovakia. Now the leaders in Europe at this time, mainly England and France, were not looking for a war. So they met with Hitler, and they met with leaders of Czechoslovakia, and they convinced the people of Czechoslovakia to allow Hitler to have that piece of land and sign what is known in history as the Munich Agreement, or the Munich Pact. Essentially, a peace agreement between Hitler's Germany and Czechoslovakia. I'm going to have a YouTube video showing here in just a second. This is Neville Chamberlain. He's the Prime Minister of England. Here we have the signing of the Munich Pact, the photo probably right before, maybe right after, with Hitler and Chamberlain. And here's Mr. Chamberlain just so happy to greet Der Führer. Take a couple minutes to watch this YouTube video. You can see it's Neville Chamberlain, Peace in Our Time, a very famous quote from Neville Chamberlain, and his belief that when Hitler says all we want is this little piece of Czechoslovakia and it's the last piece of Europe we want, this guy believes him. So let's watch this. I hope it doesn't buffer on you, but hopefully we'll just see.
The settlement of the Czechoslovakian problem, which has now been achieved, is, in my view, only the prelude to a larger settlement in which all Europe may find peace. This morning, I had another talk with the German Chancellor, Herr Hitler. Here is the paper which bears his name upon it as well as mine. Some of you perhaps have already heard what it contains, but I would just like to read it to you. We, the German Führer and Chancellor, and the British Prime Minister, have had a further meeting today and are agreed in recognizing that the question of Anglo-German relations is of the first importance for the two countries and for Europe. We regard the agreement signed last night and the Anglo-German naval agreement as symbolic of the desire of our two peoples never to go to war with one another again.
So the crowd cheers, and Chamberlain triumphantly waves the piece of paper for all to see. Hitler's signature: never go to war again, we promise. And this is a prelude to peace in Europe. And they believed him. And this is the same story that Hitler gave every time he took a piece of land, a country in Europe. He kept saying the same thing: I don't want any more, this is all I want. I don't want any more, this is all I want. And people believed him. So the Munich Pact was signed in September of 1938. Guess what happens in the early parts of 1939? So much for an agreement, so much for a promise. Mussolini, leader of Italy, takes the tiny little country of Albany and once again pounds his chest, talking about how triumphant the Italian army was. Remember, he defeated tiny little Ethiopia, those fierce, vicious warriors with spears and shields made out of straw and wood. Again, Hitler goes on the offensive and this time moves eastward towards Russia, but instead of aggressively seeking out land in Russia, he secures a treaty. To the astonishment of the world, Hitler and Joseph Stalin of Russia sign a peace treaty. This is called a non-aggression treaty. You can see the Russian-German pact signed. Everyone was very surprised at this. Here you have Joseph Stalin, and you have the Prime Minister of Germany here, Ribbentrop, there's his name down there. And then this is Molotov, Valery Molotov, signing the documents. And they also believed that Hitler promised, this is all we want, we won't take any more. Let's you and I, Mr. Stalin, Mr. Hitler, let's you and I divide up Poland. And Stalin was okay with it. So you can see that Russia and Germany divide up Poland. And essentially what this non-aggression pact does for Hitler, it secures his eastern border. He no longer has to worry about an attack on this side. He can now redirect his efforts on the west side, and his ultimate goal is to take these countries, France, and then essentially Great Britain. He doesn't worry too much about Spain right now. Ferdinand Franco is a fascist who has gained control of Spain, and he is showing support for Mussolini and Hitler. So Spain is out of Hitler's worries right now. Eventually, Hitler will take over Spain and essentially want to take over the world. But right now, he's not worrying about Spain. With the non-aggression pact being signed with Russia, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria joined the Axis powers, hoping to take advantage of whatever pieces of land and pieces of prosperity Hitler might gain through all of this. These countries over here no longer have to worry about Russia. They've signed a pact with Hitler. If anybody gets attacked, if Russia attacks these countries, they have the guarantee that Hitler will help them out. The leaders of France and England, after seeing the pact, the non-aggression pact between Russia and Germany, after seeing Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria join the forces, and Hitler going back on his word in the Munich Pact by taking all of Czechoslovakia, they figure out, finally, that this guy is just going to lie to get his way. And the more and more they appease him, and I'll tell you more about that word in just a second, the more and more they appease him, the more he takes. So Hitler mobilizes, he moves troops into the Rhineland, and France finally fortifies a series of defenses known as the Maginot Line along the German-French border. There you see the Maginot Line. The Maginot Line was built beginning in 1930. After World War I, the French wanted to make sure that should any crisis arise like World War I ever again, they wanted to be ready for it. So they fortified the area south of the Ardennes forest with these concrete barriers. And this is what just a piece of it looked like. Not just like the concrete barriers like along the Rhineland. These are actually fortifications, and you can mount large cannons inside. And then below the surface, you can see this extensive system of essentially underground trenches with command posts and everything they would need for defense systems. The problem with the Maginot Line, it was south of the Ardennes forest. And they built it there because they believed that no one would want to ever try to make it through the forest and attack France. It's so thick. So they figured it'd be easier for the enemy to attack the Maginot Line head on. Well, it's the French, and that's all I'll say about that. Germany uses the strategy of divide and conquer and slowly moves across the Western Europe as it takes Belgium, Holland, and the Netherlands. All the while, Hitler makes promises that Germany has no intentions of military actions in these countries. He simply wants to establish a system of protection for Germans living in these countries. An interesting story. Once Hitler gets Denmark, he then moves. He now has basically access to the sea, to Norway, and he moves ships onto Norway ports, and he stages these, or he makes these ships look like cargo ships, but they're like the Trojan horse of the old stories. Below deck are all these weapons of warfare, tanks and cannons and all kinds of ammunition hidden below deck. So the people of Norway had no idea what was coming. All of this takes place in 1940. Inevitably, as you saw, Germany was too much for the French and English forces along the Ardennes. Notice that very little fighting took place along the Maginot Line. This is the Ardennes Forest, and that's where all the fighting took place, and that's where the weakest defenses were. So Germany, Hitler pushes the English and French back across the English Channel and into France. And you see here that France is split, and it appears that France is allowed to control a little bit of the southern portion of France. We'll get to that in just a second. It's not as good as it looks. In England, Winston Churchill has replaced Neville Chamberlain as Prime Minister. They figured out that Chamberlain was a weakling, and he became just the laughing stock of England, someone who believed Hitler's lies. Churchill turns out to be the wartime Prime Minister that England needs, and he sets his aggressions and determinations against Germany. With Hitler taking France, Mussolini sees an opportunity to take land he feels should have been given to Italy following World War I, as he takes a piece of the southern portion of France. The French leaders ask Hitler for an armistice, which is a ceasefire, not a surrender. And this was because they were hoping to gain a little something from Hitler taking all of France. Remember, I showed you there on the map how the southern portion of France was allowed to be kept in French control. Hitler agrees, but this armistice has a little twist to it. That twist, Hitler demands, not asks, not requires, a very, very fierce demand that this armistice be signed in the very same train car where the Treaty of Versailles was signed. This is the treaty, remember, after World War I that forced Germany to end hostilities. This act was the final act of revenge for Hitler and Germany, which he promised to his followers. With these victories, Germans all over the globe begin to wonder if Hitler can ever be stopped. In German schools, the children sang his praises as he continued to build his empire. Here's the train car. Now, to show you what kind of a nut job Hitler was, this train car was picked up and moved into downtown Paris at the base of the Eiffel Tower. Here you see the leaders walking onto the train. And again, just a final act of revenge, a final slap in the face. And here's a final pose of Hitler, his triumphant pose, if you will, as he takes France. We'll get to this guy in just a second. Just wanted to show you the map again. This is the area we're talking about, and that man, we'll go back to him in just a second. He is allowed to control this piece of France and then northern parts of Africa. This guy's name is Marshal Pétain. Now, Marshal is his title. Marshal Pétain. This is the man who decided to go with and side with Nazi Germany and Hitler in hopes of gaining control of France once Hitler was finished conquering. Even he believed that Hitler just wanted to take a little bit of Europe and he would leave most of France, or the bottom southern portion of France, to him. This guy turned his back on his Frenchmen, fellow French citizens, and became a follower of Hitler. And that sets the stage for the very famous battles of Britain. In our next vodcast, we'll talk about how Hitler attempts to take the island of Britain and fails, and then he is forced to work his way back east because of some failures of Italy. And then about that time is when the United States decides to get involved in the war in Europe. Again, about 21 minutes. I hope it's not been too boring, and hope you enjoyed the interactive map. It's been fun. Talk to you later.